Welcome to the Histories of Northamptonshire podcast series, and this episode number 5. Recorded on location, each episode tells the story of one of the many and varied objects which are the focus of the exhibition A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects. The exhibition runs at the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery between the 20th of September 2025 and February 2026. Selected by local individuals, heritage groups and the museum's own curators, each object tells a different story from the county's past. And so, to our guest for this episode.
My name is Jill Birrell. I'm one of the curators at Northampton Museum and Art Gallery. I've worked here for about 3 years, in quite a varied role, looking after, researching and displaying objects from our very varied collections.
Welcome, Jill. What item are we talking about on this particular edition of the podcast series?
We have a mammoth tooth. We call them megafauna, so very large animals, and they are cousins of today's elephants. So elephants, giraffes, rhinos, they are all megafauna that still exist and that evolved millions and millions of years ago. They split off into sort of 3 different branches, and we got this development of a woolly mammoth in colder climates, very, very similar to today's elephants, but with a big furry coat, basically.
Same sort of size, but with a furry coat, so we're talking about a very cold climate. Indeed, we're talking about the Ice Age.
Yes, so there were lots of ice ages, but our last ice age happened in the geologic period called the Pleistocene, and that affected Britain. There would have been a very large ice sheet which covered more or less of the land in Northern Europe, leaving some places in Britain completely uninhabitable and some where animals like these mammoths roamed.
You mentioned that mammoths have been around for millions of years. We're talking about an animal that lived after the dinosaurs, though.
Yes, so not dinosaurs, just very large mammals. The Pleistocene is as recent as about 11,000 years ago to about 2 million years ago, so quite a long period, but towards the end of it, as the climate starts to warm up, we do have Homo sapiens, so modern humans, living alongside and probably hunting these mammoths as well.
Big target to go for, and if you've seen the movie Ice Age, you know the sort of animal we're talking about. This is a tooth. For people who can't see it, how big is this tooth? Tell me about the structure of it.
This one's quite large, so it's maybe about the length of my forearm, and you can see how it's made up. So it's got these plates of enamel and dentine. You can see it's got these really rough layers, which gives a really hard surface. In some ways it looks quite flat, but it would have been very useful for these mammoths to eat what they had available, which was dense shrubs, really rough grasses growing on the ground, so they needed something that could grind up these hard plants.
Woolly mammoths, despite their size, they were vegetarians.
Yes, so that's what would have been available to them in the environment. They wouldn't have lived very near or on top of the ice sheets like you might see in the Ice Age movies, but in what's called the tundra, so a sort of desert. So the ice sheets are very wet and full of ice and water, and the tundra is very, very barren and dry, so a cold desert really, and it's got these shrubs. No trees could survive, but these tall grasses and woody plants.
Where was this particular tooth found, Jill?
So this was found during gravel extraction in Islip in the north of the county, so it's in the Nen Valley. There are a lot of these gravel pits that have been extracted quite frequently over the last 100-200 years. And what is in the mix of all this gravel? You find these prehistoric objects like mammoth teeth.
I believe that mammoths weren't gifted of many teeth. In fact, they had very few teeth.
Yes, only 4 at one time. So 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. And you can sort of imagine it using its big trunk to feed itself into its mouth. But they had 6 sets over a lifetime, and they got sort of bigger and stronger as the animals grew bigger.
So as a vegetarian with not many teeth and a large trunk, a lot of a mammoth's time would have spent eating, frankly, because it's an enormous animal and you're not going to get much nourishment out of grasses.
Yes, I imagine so. I think They had some advantages to being quite large. I'm sure it protected it from the elements, from the really freezing cold. But yes, not a whole lot to do probably in the tundra.
You mentioned that this particular tooth was found during gravel extraction near Islip. That puts it reasonably close to the River Nen. Do we have any kind of indication as to how this mammoth met its end?
I can't imagine we know exactly how this one would have met its end. It could have been a tooth that was lost over its lifetime. They had 6 sets. We know that humans did hunt these mammoths for its meat, for its fur. My understanding towards the end of the Ice Age, when Britain starts to warm up, is that we then have a lot of water moving around, and it moves these large quantities of sort of rubble, of gravel, of other things like rubbish really, these mammoth teeth, and it moves it around and they end up in these ditches. So there's quite a lot of geologic forms that are created at the end of the Ice Age. In mountains there's identifiable shapes from the erosion, from all this earth moving around with the water, and in Northampton we have a lot of gravel pits in particular.
So where it was found could be a complete coincidence. It doesn't necessarily tell us anything about the lifestyle of this particular mammoth.
No, it won't be as precise as that. Of course, back in the Pleistocene era, there is no Northamptonshire. The rivers are very different, the whole landscape is very different, and we're attached to continental Europe by land known as the Dogger Land. So things were really very, very different to how they are. And it's probably the melting of the ice sheets that has moved that tooth into the pit it was eventually found in.
We know that elephants live in family groups. We know that elephants are herd animals. Was it the same with woolly mammoths?
Yes, I think we can assume that their behaviours were very similar. They were genetically cousins and they would have lived very similarly. People are still really fascinated by them. There's an American company at the moment trying to resurrect mammoths through genetic modification. So there are Asian elephants and they want to genetically modify their DNA to recreate a woolly version. They want to see mammoths come back to life.
So the day of the woolly mammoth might not yet be over. It might be returning if modern day man and his technological interests follow the path that this particular company is talking about.
That's right. They are quite ambitious and want to see this first woolly mammoth rebirthed in 2028, so not really far off. And I think the latest thing they published was they've genetically modified woolly mice. So I'm not really sure what the advantages are, but they are quite keen to do this.
Well, that's for a day beyond this particular exhibition, and we'll wait and see whether or not aspiration becomes reality. Jill, why should this item be in the exhibition of the 100 items telling the histories of Northamptonshire? What do we learn about Northamptonshire from it?
So this tooth, like many fossils, is really a time capsule. It can transport you right back to thousands, if not millions of years ago, to a stage when Northamptonshire, when this land was completely unrecognisable. And you can see the real thing. It survived that long. What I think is quite special about this tooth is that it pairs really very old history with something that happened only about 100 years ago when it was dug up during gravel extraction. It reminds us that this gravel, when we're extracting it, is actually millions of years old, as some of these mammoths were.
And the process of learning never stops.
Exactly.
Jill, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this Histories of Northamptonshire podcast. If you would like to find out more about the objects or listen to other episodes in the series, go to www.northamptonmuseums.com. Alternatively, you can visit the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery, where you can see the A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects exhibition for yourself. The Histories of Northamptonshire project is funded by Arts Council England as part of the National Portfolio Programme.